So this is the opening screen of MCAtlas. You're presented with a splash screen. We like to post items in here when new things are added. So you can see here, September 2022, we added the eSheet export format for the print tool. I'll get into that a little bit more later today. I'm gonna go ahead and click OK. And you're immediately met with the county boundary of Montgomery County. Um, I'm clicking on the map, I'm dragging it around. I can zoom in with the mouse wheel. I can zoom out with the mouse wheel. I can start zooming in with the zoom in, zoom out. And for people that want to be a little fancy, you can hold down the shift key and go ahead and uh, click and make a rectangle, and you're zoomed in. I'm going to talk a little bit about basic navigation at the moment, just where things are, what things are. Over on the left is the layer list. This is when you start adding pieces of information to the map. So easy, very easy click, just check that box and you're immediately met with a visualization of data that is displayed onto the web map. Um, we have a bunch of widgets over here in the top left of the web map. We have a search bar that zoom in, zoom out. We have a home icon, which takes you back to the default extent. And at the bottom is my location. I'm in the office today, so that's taking me right to the Wheaton headquarters. Hit that default, and I'm back to where I was. A couple more widgets. We have a walkshed tool, which I'll show today, elevation profile, a new select widget that we just added. And in the top right, there are more tools here. We're looking at the data library. We just did an update on this yesterday. I'll get into this. Bookmark, I'll go over the bookmark very quickly. I'm going to use the search bar, put in Wheaton, Maryland. I've got a point right here. I'm just going to add a bookmark and just call it Wheaton. So if I zoom around on the map, if I go somewhere else, if I click that, it's going to take me right to where I was. So that's all I'm getting into for the bookmark today because we have a lot to discuss. We have the print widget, measurement tool, drawing, the base map gallery, which will load. It takes a little bit of time to load, but I promise you it will. Then we have a query widget, which I'll be using for a demonstration later on. We have a property map export. And last but not least, a new filter widget that was recently added. This is blank. We can preload filter parameters here, but if you look at the very bottom, you have these filter actions, create a custom filter, and you're off to the races here. So if I'm looking at something like zoning, add an expression, and find something very, very specific. So I'm going to jump into the layer list now. I'm going to go back to my default extent. And now I'm just going to start clicking on some items. We have new places of interest layer. And I'm going to hit this drop down. And it's going to show me all these different places of interest. I'm going to go ahead and click business parks. And a lot of our data sets, most of them are interactive, so I can click on them and start looking at a pop-up to gain more information. And I can start zooming in. I'm going to use that shift, zoom in a little bit. And in this layer list, some things just turned on, this property polygons. I'm going to zoom out one more and show you what this looks like before. This is grayed out. So if we click on these three dots, we can start seeing at all these options for how you can interact with some pieces of information here. When something is grayed out, that means you're outside the set visibility range. So we are this little inverted triangle here, and if I'm inside the needles, I can start seeing that visualized data. I can always move these to have a greater visibility. Not recommended for something like property polygons because there's a lot to load and draw onto the screen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just how much information is available in this layer list already. And there's a lot to scroll through. There's a lot to open up. Um, just looking at places of interest, this is dominating the entire layer list already. So I'm going to scroll up to the very top and use the search bar instead. So maybe I'm interested in something like rustic roads. Put RUS, and I immediately have that available to me. I'm going to use rustic roads for a little bit here. And I've got a lot on the map already um, with my base map here, but I think it's getting a little too busy. So I'm going to go into our base map gallery, and we have a whole bunch of base maps that you can choose from. You can some our very own imagery layers. For someone that's in Down County and maybe you want to see an imagery layer for not just Montgomery County, you can always just use Esri's world imagery layer here. And I'm going to be using this for a little bit. So we have imagery and imagery with labels. Um, I like these labels, but in our data library, we have a communities layer. So before I really start jumping into this, I'm just going to search for communities here. And I'm going to add these communities to the map. So I've got an imagery layer. I have some labels that popped up. That's good to know. I can always hide labels here, but I want to turn them on because I want to use them as reference points in my map. But I have no need for these green boundaries. So I'm going to go click these three dots again, and I'm going to turn this transparency to 100%. So I still have this this nice label on the map, but I just made the boundary itself completely transparent. So so I've got these rustic roads here, and I just clicked on the map, and that's actually the boundary of this community here. I don't even want to see that, so I'm just going to disable this pop-up for now. And I'm going to start looking at this rustic road, and I want to put some historic preservation photos on top of them too. I have some really great photos here. Um, I really like this image. Maybe there's some more buildings out there that fit this description. Maybe we should go collect some images. And maybe you need to generate a PDF or a printed map to send off to one of your colleagues and tell them like, hey, let's go check out this rustic road and see if we can find another historic building to generate a photo for MCAtlas, and let's find a parcel for that particular building. So what I'm first going to do is use the query widget, and I am going to turn on my property boundaries. I believe I turned them off. So I'm going to turn on my property points. And I want to collect some information right next to this historic photo that I really liked. I've got a tax number here, and I'm going to put this into our query widget that we can find on the top right. And I'm going to add this item right here. I'm going to name it specifically, and I'm going to hit apply. So I found this very specific polygon, and I want someone to go out and to investigate this parcel and investigate this building to see if it meets the description of a historic building that may require a photo. I'm going to click the three dots here to just beef up this color a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and change the symbol of this parcel, and I want it to be 50% transparent, and I'm going to bump up the outline a little bit. So I've got this area here, but it also looks like this to me looks like a stream valley. So I'm gonna go back to task and go back, go to park units. So I want to find another layer specifically just show this specific stream valley unit here. I already know what it's called. It's the Watts Branch SVU2. So I'm gonna change this name to Watts Branch SVU2 and hit apply. So I didn't lose that parcel polygon. It was just turned off when we generated a new result. So I'm going to turn that back on. And if I zoom out, I've got a lot going on. Not a whole lot, but this green is not coming out that great. So again, I'm going to change the symbol and I'm going to make it kind of like a weird looking green. Still green because it's a park, and that makes sense to me intuitively, but that works pretty well. But it's covering up the rustic road a little bit. So I'm gonna go back into the symbol, go back here, and actually just, that was it. Actually just make this outline with 0. So I'm just seeing the fill color, and I can see those rustic roads underneath without it being overtaken by that outline boundary, the outline color. So I'm almost ready to print something out, but I want to create a little bit more detail. I'm going to use the draw tool, and I'm going to start putting some more things on the map here. And I want to create more emphasis on this particular parcel. So I just put a point on the map. Maybe you can use a lasso and you can create your own features. You can always undo something if you don't want it there. I'm going to go ahead and just do an arrow because I want to add a little bit more text in. I don't want that green text. I just want a black arrow. So I'm going to give a nice point here, and then I'm going to use the text. I'm going to change my font color to white, and I'm going to just say investigate building on this parcel. Once I have my text complete, I can just click right onto the map, and then I've got it right there. I'm going to put a little ellipsis with a little bit of color just to add a little bit something underneath this text box. That's not a whole lot, so I'll just make it 50% and do it again. So now I've got something I'm fairly happy with. I'm ready to print. So if I hover over any of these icons, I can see this says print. Also the icon, pretty straightforward. Like the splash screen said, we just added ANSI E landscape and portrait to our print options. So that's for like the big plotter, the big poster maps that you can use. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to use an ANSI D. So this is the landscape, and I'm going to give this the name of that tax ID that we used for the parcel query. It's a PDF, and I want to talk about one specific thing inside this advance, and I'll show the difference. This preserve, you have the option for map scale and map extent. I'm going to do scale first and just show you what that looks like. Go ahead and click print. So this takes a little bit to load. As Jay mentioned, you all are more than welcome to put questions into the chat, but I also recommend using the Q&A as well. Bianca correctly noted, does everyone have access to MCAtlas? The first question. I hope you all do. You can use this URL, mcatlas.org/viewer, and you should have access to it. So if you don't, you can reach out to me at a later time, and we'll get you all set up. But this is open to the public. So our first web map was generated. I'm going to go ahead and switch the next one to extent and change this to extent. And I'm going to print this one. While we're waiting, let's take a look at that scale. So now at the scale, you see we're looking at 49%. If we go to 100, this is the level of detail that we're looking at with this scale, where you're really getting some pretty good imagery for building footprints. And you're also seeing the query up there at the top as well. Whereas if you're looking on my map extent right now, you don't see the query anywhere in the extent of the map that my screen is displaying right now. So if we look at extent, pretty different. And this takes some trial and error. If we look at that ellipsis, it was probably never necessary, especially if you're doing something on the extent here. And you may want to dial back your text when you're doing something, when you're printing something out at a map extent. But if we look at 100%, that's some really great imagery for building footprints here. Gives you a lot to think about if you're printing something out. So that's all I want to show for print. I think this is a good moment to see if anyone has any questions. You can raise your hand or you can put something in the chat. I'll give it 5 to 10 seconds. If not, I'm going to go ahead and move on.
Colin, Jamie's got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Was there a legend on the map? I can't remember when you pulled it up if there was a legend included.
So this particular one does not have a legend.
Okay.
If I look into the advanced, I don't have an option here, but if we look at some of our other items here, some of these do have legends already generated inside of them.
Okay.
So
I just wasn't sure if that was an option.
Yeah, so here's one that we just printed. This is ANSI A landscape, and you have a scale bar. You've got your legends. It's not showing the items that are drawn from the draw widget, but this is getting you a pretty great deal of the way. Near this area, forgot to show, we're looking at that nice big quarry in our county, and I want to show some of the measurement tools. So we have a measurement widget here. I can do areas, distance, and very specific point locations. So if you see my mouse, the lat long is changing all over the place. If I click down, I have it saved. And I can go ahead and copy and paste this and bring it elsewhere. For distance, I'll just do feet. I put 1 point down. And then when I'm done and I want to find my calculation, I double click, and now I'm looking at my feet. Same thing goes for creating an area. I'll just go with acres for now. Put 1 point down, 2, 3, 4, and then on my last one, I double click. So that's measurement. But I also kind of want to understand the elevation profile of this particular quarry. So I'm going to go ahead and use elevation profile. I'm going to expand this out a little bit more just so I can see what's going on here. I'm going to click this distance tool and I'm going to select feet. And it's the same thing as the distance measurement tool. Put 1 point down, another point down with a double click. And I'm going to give myself even more space. I'm going to click this and just put the layer list away for a moment. So this is a nice elevation profile of the quarry. If you can see that X moving across the graphical chart, you also see it on the web map. Say I want to share this with somebody, I would use the snipping tool. delay this for about 2 seconds and hit new, and then just put my X wherever I want it to be. And now I'm ready to snip this out, copy it, send it off in Teams, put it in a document, putting it in an email. I'm ready to rock and roll with what I found, just with what I've just found. So let's jump back into the layer list a little bit and talk about our add data widget. We've just expanded our library a bit, um, and I want to talk specifically about uh, MNC, PPC, AJOL. So this is a curated list of data sets that are maintained by the commission, specifically the Montgomery County. And we have a curated list of users, and we're gathering all their data and adding it into our data library here. You can see Chris McGovern, Carter Hughes, Jay McCurgy, and a few others that are also listed in here. If I zoom out, you'll start to see that we have a lot more items. So this is being filtered by the zoom extent right now, by what's in the map. So just a brief example, I'll put in something like EAM. So now I can pull in all those EAM asset points, or maybe something like Thrive. Put in the Thrive's activity heat map. Sorry, I'm just checking out the chat. Yeah, please use the Q&A for questions. And I'll answer a few right now. Atara, how does one turn off aerial/base map? So when you want to go back to a default background, you go back to the base map gallery, and then you'll go ahead and choose. I believe the default view is topographic. So now we're back to the topographic base map. So you can switch them as a million times, as many times as you'd like. And Clark Larson, yes, that is correct. You still see my park unit Watts branch and parcel polygon with that specific tax ID. That is only there for the session. So it's saved for the specific session. If you were to do a Control F5 or refresh, you would lose that particular query. All right, so that is we talk more about what I like to call the living MCAtlas a little bit later. But I want to talk about a new item that we just added, which is this curated list of Esri demographic data, and then DC data and MDI map. So those that aren't familiar, MDI map is the geospatial data catalog for the state of Maryland that they host and maintain. So if I'm interested in something like annual average daily traffic, I'll go ahead and put that into the map. And I see this for the entire state of Maryland, but luckily enough, DC also has this traffic volume as well. Annual average daily traffic counts got crazy during COVID, so they're really just showing information up until I think about 2019. So if you're looking at MDI maps, annual average daily traffic, what I see here is 2018. I'm assuming 2019 is the current. So you have annual daily traffic and average annual weekday traffic here. And you also have this information in DC as well. But it's just like a different data schema. So you don't have as much data as you would have from MDI mapping. So that's a little bit of MDI map in DC. I want to talk a little bit about Esri. For that, I'm going to just search ACS, American Community Survey. These are tons and tons of data sets hosted by Esri. I'm going to add median household income variables to the map. And just click on an item and we're looking at some median household income. We're looking at it based off of household age. And then we're also looking at it based upon race and ethnicity. If I want to know even more about this, I can always click on details. And now I'm looking at their item details page where they're telling me what exact variables or tables that they're using from the ACS. It's giving me the vintage as well. It's telling me that it's been identified as authoritative and it lives in the Living Atlas. There's another one I'm going to show real quick called Update. This is Esri's updated demographic variables. I'm going to go ahead and add this to the map. And it's asking me to sign in. What does that mean? So I'm going to cancel and go to details. So this is subscriber content. That basically means anyone that has a username has access to this information. There's something else called premium content, and that will consume credits when you're using it in a map. So that's panning, zooming, clicking on a pop-up. So if you're ever prompted with, and it's being added to the map. So now I just got a whole bunch of data for track, county, congressional district, state, and country. I'm just going to focus on tracks for now and look at all of this wonderful, wonderful data. So this is Esri's updated demographics. You have access to this in Business Analyst for ArcGIS Online. So if you're ever running infographic reports, this is a lot of the data that Esri's pulling to generate those infographics. I'm going to use the select tool now and open this up a little bit. I'm going to make myself some space first and use the select tool. So I want to find out some information about some specific census tracts here. I'm going to select by lasso and grab these 14 census tracts. To select something, you have to make sure it's turned on here with the layers. So I have 14 that I just grabbed. I'm going to go ahead and just look at the stats real quick. What's the total combined population of these 14 census tracts combined? I have that opportunity. And here are all the variables that live inside of this attribute table. So it's just a ton of data that you can bring into your own web map and symbolize as you see fit. I'll do that in a second, but maybe I also just want to export this data to a CSV file. Now I'm looking at these 14 census tracts and all of this data in an Excel file to do analysis outside of ArcGIS. Maybe I just want to do a quick recommended chart on this data right here. I've got something very, very quick for average household size. And you can imagine doing that on a different geography, maybe congressional districts instead of census tracts. All right. So I've been talking a little bit about Living Atlas, and there's a ton of data here. I'd be more than happy to go over a lot of it with you at a later date, whether on another webinar or in private. I'm always available through Teams. But I want to talk about Living Atlas because I've said it a bunch. This is a global geospatial data library that Esri hosts and maintains. They are not the only publisher of information into Living Atlas, but this is a wonderful, wonderful resource for anyone that's doing GIS work. I'm going to go ahead and filter to the United States, and I'm looking at some really interesting stuff already. I can sort by what was the most recently updated thing. Ethanol plants. I've got these users here. Um, I'm just going to go ahead and click Esri Live Feeds to, and I'm going to look at that item, the items that they maintain. So I'm looking at just this one username's data right now, but what I can do is grab this owner and bring it back into MCAtlas. And back in my very first add data, instead of using the commissions AGOL, I'll use the entire ArcGIS Online. So this is everything, like anything public, good or bad. There's a lot of crap out there, so it's important to know who your sources are. But in this search, I can just paste that owner equals every live feeds to, and now I can start populating my map with this data. So if I want to understand how the air quality is in Montgomery County, I have access to that. And if anything's bad, I'll get a spike and start seeing some different stuff. Okay. Yeah. All right. So really, I could just, this is one I know off the top of my head. I used to do some low income housing tax credit work. So maybe I'm interested in HUD data. So now I'm looking at all the QCTs. I can find some DDAs. I can find HUD assisted multifamily properties. Anything that, if there's any like group out there that you think may have an AGOL, you can probably find their public data. So this is a really great tool. You can use this for the owner of usernames. You can also use group IDs as well. For those familiar with ArcGIS Online organizations and finding groups. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff out here. Some of it's really cool. There's a lot of bad stuff too, but I like cicadas. I used to eat them when I was in middle school for a summer. Now I'm waiting to see when I'm gonna eat cicadas in my 30s. So yeah. All right. Let me just go through my checklist. I'm gonna do one more owner here, and I'm gonna look at the FEMA's National Risk Index. But before I do that, since I really like this data, I'm gonna go back to Esri demographics and put in this updated again. I can always click these three dots and click show item details. And if I want to know more about the data, I can just click data and start understanding all the fields that are inside of this attribute table. So when I'm ready, I can just open up a new web map, let this load. So now I'm looking at census tracts. And instead of visualizing this as a compound annual growth rate of 2022 to 2027, I'll just change this to any of the other variables that they're providing. Maybe I want to see anything. Disposable income, 200,000 or greater. And this is the nationwide data set, so you can really have some fun with this, and look at this at how you see fit. But all right, let's turn everything off again and start looking at this National Risk Index. So again, you can always just click on the census tract and start learning about what's going on here. Um, this risk index is our relationship to natural hazards. So anything like uh, hurricanes, coastal flooding, river flooding, earthquakes. What's the risk? What's the risk? Not just people, but for the value of buildings in particular areas as well. Um, so I've got a lot of data here. It's all census tracts for all the U.S., but I'm going to view the attribute table here, and I'm really only interested in Montgomery County. So I'm just going to filter this data for Montgomery County. So I'm going to go to options. It still has to load the table. So I go to options. I'm going to filter this. So I have this filter option where I can add an expression. I'm going to go to the census FIPS code and say starts with. And Montgomery County FIPS code is 2424 for Maryland and 031. 031 is the code for Montgomery County inside of Maryland. So now I'm just looking at our census tracts for the county. I can do this lasso again, and I can pull up the stats here. But I'm not done with this filter. I'm going to add a little bit more to it. I want to add another, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to use population, but I could do a number of things here. I'm going to do population is greater than 3,000. So whenever you add a second expression, you say display features in the layer that match all of the following expressions. You could do all or any. For this particular case, I want it to match all of the expressions here. So I filtered out some census tracts here, but to me that's not enough. So I'll bump it up another 1,000. And now I've really started filtering out areas here. And now I can do another filter. This is an area of interest. Maybe I can print this out again. The opportunities are endless. But maybe what I want to do is just bring this into ArcGIS Pro and make something really pretty. Not saying you can't make something pretty here, but maybe I want to do my own custom layout with a little bit more customization. So I'm going to go to the item details here. So I've got this item. If I scroll down past the description, near the terms of use, I have a URL. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And now I'm in an ArcGIS Pro project. And I'm going to add data right underneath imagery when I'm in the map pane. I'm going to add data from a path. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this in. So I got some cool stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and double this. So on this layer, I'm going to hold Control, click, and drag this layer down, and then let go of my left click. And now I've just doubled it up here. I'm going to do a fade underneath. So for this second item, I'm going to bump this transparency maybe up to 50. And for this one on the top, I'm going to double click and just do that same definition query. So census tract FIPS begins with 24031. And I'll hit OK. So now I've really created some emphasis just for Montgomery County. I'm going to bump it up a notch, one more. And I'm going to add a little feathering around the county to really make it pop and stand out against all the other data that I see on the map here. And then when I'm ready, I can always just create a layout. and now I'm ready to print something out.